not only is not everything okay, or something went slightly wrong, or this was slightly miscalculated, it was she has a 0% chance of survival, and I don't think she's going to live through the day. This is the Swino Creative Podcast. I'll be your host, professional photographer and video content creator, Brian Swino. In this podcast, we will discuss all parts of business, marketing, mindset, creativity, and self-improvement. Sometimes with the help of a special guest to provide some incredible outside perspective. Usually for these podcasts, I will have a really good idea of what I'm going to say. This one, I'm just going to go in and speak. This is something that I've wanted to touch on for a while, and it seems like the perfect sort of timing right now to give some sort of a backstory. Today, whenever I'm recording this, is February 16th, 2025. And for any of you who don't know, on February 14th, on Valentine's Day of 2020, about 2 weeks before all the COVID stuff happened, all of that, the whole world shut down, I very unexpectedly lost my mom. And my mom had been battling cancer for a couple years leading up to this, and she had beat it. She had beat the cancer. She had to continuously have surgery to replace a stent in her kidneys because of the damage caused by all the cancer treatments and stuff. And that weakened her immune system. It weakened her whole body. There were complications to do with this surgery, and she had to have it repeatedly. It wasn't something that was like one and done. Every 3 to 4 months, for some reason, she had to have this surgery again to replace that stent. For some reason, the stent that they had in there, it wouldn't last more than a couple months without her, I guess, body starting to fight it and turning septic. So us and our family, and my mom especially, going through this, went through all of this and beat cancer, but continuously had to go through having this surgery. Once you go through surgery several times over and over again, apparently your body can almost start being allergic to the anesthetic that they're using. And during one of the surgeries, it caused my mom's heart to stop. I was at work at that time. My brothers were at work. We got a call that my mom was in surgery and had flatlined. And so obviously we're freaking out and going crazy. That happened, and then she came back. Everything ended up being fine. It turns out that the oxygen level dropped to a certain thing, and then I don't know what all was going on. Whatever was happening wasn't good, obviously, and her body was fighting the anesthesia, but also doing all this other stuff. So they then, going forward from that, had to stop doing the surgery as much to replace the stent, but then she started having complications from the stent not being changed as regularly and things like that. So just one thing after the next thing, after the next thing, after the next thing. I don't know how long it was after that, but my mom one day just started complaining that her hip was hurting. My mom was not a fan of needles or going to the doctor, and obviously going through cancer treatments, having your blood taken, all the things. Every time you go to the doctor, and it's almost every day, multiple times per week at least, she was having to have this done. So obviously she wasn't wanting to volunteer herself to have her blood drawn, go to the doctor any more than was already necessary for her. We obviously told her that she should go get checked out, and maybe it was a complication from the kidney stent or something like that. She ended up waiting, and it just got worse and worse. This pain in her hip was getting worse and worse. She woke up one day. It was either the next day after that she had told us about this, or the following day. I can't remember which one. And she woke up in bed and couldn't use her leg. Her leg would not function to be able to get out of bed. Obviously, she ended up going to the hospital, and there's a very rare form of flesh-eating bacteria is what it's, I can't remember the technical term for it, but it's basically flesh-eating bacteria, where this bacteria in your body is eating itself. Obviously, that's not good. Not good in any realm. And there's apparently two forms of that bacteria. One is not that it's not harmful, but it's the way less harmful of the two. And the second is essentially life-threatening immediately and very, very aggressive. She gets transferred to another hospital about an hour away from us that's more specialized in this. And my brother went up and stayed the night with her that night because she was going to have surgery the next morning. They did a biopsy of it, and they determined that it was the less severe option of the two once they found out what it was. I'm paraphrasing all this. It was a whirlwind of crazy things. She's there prepping to go into surgery the next morning to go in and essentially scrape all of the muscle tissue out of her leg that was infected, and it's basically dead flesh at that point. And so our expectation going up there the next morning, which was Valentine's Day, not only was it Valentine's Day, it was my parents' anniversary. My parents' anniversary was on Valentine's Day. It was their 33rd anniversary. Our expectation going up there that morning was that my mom was going to be getting out of surgery. My brother was already there, stayed the night, so he was with her the whole time. We were going up there the next morning to be there when she got out of the surgery. And from everything that we knew, we were going to have to do some physical therapy with her, because obviously they take some of the muscle out of your leg. You have to rebuild that and rebuild some of the strength and muscle back to replace it. That way your leg functions properly and all that. That was what we went in with the expectation of. That is not what happened. We went into that day. I got there. My dad got there. So it was myself, my dad, and my brother who had stayed the night. The doctor who was doing the surgery came in and pulled up a chair and sat down right in front of us. And the doctor looked at us and said, "It's much worse than we thought. She has a 0% chance of survival. I don't think that she's going to make it through the day." Obviously, very different than what we were expecting to hear. And we're sitting there. I'm holding balloons for Valentine's Day and their anniversary. And Dr. Pepper, my mom's favorite drink in the world was Dr. Pepper. So I'm sitting there holding gifts for her. That's what we get told by the doctor. Not only is not everything okay, or something went slightly wrong, or this was slightly miscalculated, it was, she has a 0% chance of survival, and I don't think she's going to live through the day. There's nothing in your life that will ever prepare you to hear something like that about your parent. Why, how could this happen? If there was the biopsy done, and then as soon as we look over, my brother has, the shock has set in, and he, faints and falls out of the chair onto the floor. So we have no time to really process anything that's happening. Then we got to turn to try to figure out if he's okay, what's going on with him. Obviously, it was just shock. My other brother was on his way. I obviously don't want to call my other brother, and tell him while he's driving what the news is that we just got. My dad and my brother are in the room, and I make the decision with them that I'm going to go down and meet my other brother as soon as he gets there and tell him what's going on. In the meantime, I don't know exactly what was going on. I can't remember exactly of what all happened or what all the conversations were that were had. I know at one point they wheeled my mom back in from having the surgery that was supposed to fix things coming out of surgery. She was under anesthesia. And so we couldn't talk to her. We couldn't tell her what was going on. We got some sort of an answer from the doctor that it was the worst of the two options and that they had got it incorrect. And rather than being a spot about the size of a baseball in her hip muscle, it had spread all the way down to her foot and all the way up into her organs. And that's what was wrong. That's why nothing could be done. She was already dying of it. There was nothing they could do. I start calling our family, telling them what's going on, my mom's sisters, and I don't even know how to process it. It's all just like a crazy blur. I remember that vividly because as soon as my aunt picked up the phone, I tried to talk and couldn't talk. I could not speak. I couldn't say, hey, we just got this news. My voice wouldn't make sound, but I would just made like a little noise essentially. And she immediately knew something was wrong, but I couldn't physically say words. I had to I walked out of the room, down the hallway, and it took until I was on the phone for like over a minute probably before I could make a sound and tell her at all what was going on. It's so crazy what happens whenever you get thrown into so much pain. There's so much going on in your body and your mind, all of the things. It's just really crazy what your body and your mind can do in those scenarios. And told them what was going on, that they needed to get there as soon as they possibly could. This is an emergency, life or death. It is that scenario. I don't know what was worse, being told the news or having to tell the news. And I really don't envy any doctor or anyone that has to be in that position of giving that news, because I think that might have been worse, honestly. My mom held on until it was 11 at night. My mom held on to that night. And I tried my best to keep it together as much as I possibly could that day, going through that for her, because obviously she's in the worst possible scenario in this. She can do nothing and she's losing her life. So I thought the least that I could do is hold it together and be strong for her in that last little bit. So throughout that day, everyone kind of took turns. All of my family, all of my mom's friends, everyone dropped everything that they possibly could and made it to the hospital to see her. I love that people in that scenario dropped everything in order to come there. She did wake up a little bit in the middle of the day to where she could nod her head. One of the things that I will never forget is that she wanted to write on a piece of paper. She kept making a writing sort of motion to us because she couldn't speak. She was intubated still. She did try to speak a couple times. She also tried to ask for Dr. Pepper, which anyone who knows my mom, that's true fashion. But the last thing that she tried to say was in response to us telling her that we loved her. The whole room was, "I love you all too." That's the last sort of thing that we could tell that she was saying. And then we got her the piece of paper that we thought she was asking for, and she tried to write, "It's okay." I still have that piece of paper, and it's hard to even look at. My mom's last two messages to us were, "I love you all too," and writing, "It's okay." Now, being here 5 years later, losing my mom didn't get any easier. Hasn't gotten any easier. The fact that I lost her hasn't gotten one bit easier. But the point of why I wanted to tell that story today and why I wanted to make this episode now while I'm in it, I'm feeling all the emotions, is that everyone in your life, everyone that you know, everyone that you meet, we all go through things like this or worse than this. Everyone goes through things like that, experiences pain. And what I want to kind of talk about a little bit is not letting that pain just consume you, because it's very easy to do in those circumstances. I've lost a couple grandparents to cancer, and you kind of see them, and you see them go through treatments, and you see them kind of over time almost becoming not themselves, for lack of a better term, really like withering away of who they are, who they've always been, the energy they've always had, the life that's always been in them. You see that happen over time. And I don't know if that is easier or harder than being gut punched with something like this that's out of the blue, no one's expecting it, and knowing, hey, you have today with your mom. We don't know how long, but we don't expect her to live through the rest of the day. I don't know which of those is better or worse or any of that. All I know is they both suck. They both hurt, and it lasts forever. But I think with this that happened with my mom, it was the shock of it all. And I tried to hold it in, which is probably not good. And these are things that I've kind of worked through after the fact. And like, I'm a very introspective person, which is what I want to kind of talk about today. After this all happened, going home, and then you have to almost go into your routine of what life is, going to work, coming home from work, parenting, being there for your kids. You know, all these things, life continues on for everyone else around you and you almost have to just compartmentalize that happened and find a way to keep going, to keep getting up, to go to work, to keep picking the kids up from school, to keep making dinner, to keep doing all the things that are necessary to survive and live and go along in life. But the whole time you have a part of your brain that's just like screaming, doesn't know what to do. For me, personally speaking, it was about a 6-month period after that happened. After February 14th happened, a 6-month sort of period where it was just like every day I felt lower and lower and lower and lower. And I just never figured out how to use that negative hurt feeling and turn it into something that I could not feel worse the next day for. And then you go through all of these things and you just try to be there and try to be present. And I don't know if there's any right or wrong way to go about any of this, or if what I'm saying even makes sense right now, but I got to the bottom. I got to the place that I've never been in my life and never been since, which I can only refer to as the bottom of the bottom that I've ever felt, where it was full on depression. It was full on, I don't really want to continue being here. Not that I didn't want to live, but it was just one of those, I don't know if I do moments. I remember just like it just happened. I was in our kitchen floor at like 2 or 3 in the morning, just straight bawling my eyes out. not knowing what to do with myself. And in that moment, my fiance Mary came in, got with me on the floor, and I remember just saying, I don't want to feel like this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. I can't keep doing this. The only thing that I knew going forward was that I can't keep doing this, because what I'm doing is a spiral down. So that was the moment for me. That lowest of low moment, being on my floor in the kitchen, was my moment. That was the moment for me where the light switch got flipped. I decided, consciously made the choice in that moment that I am not going to feel like this anymore. I'm not going to allow myself to feel this low anymore. And I'm going to turn the energy that I have, all the negative, all the sadness, all of that, into effort. And that was the moment that my life changed. I worked at a factory at that point. I was trying to build my business on the side and work at the factory. And honestly, neither one of them were succeeding in that moment. But I decided to double down, go after what I wanted in life. My mom worked at Walmart for over 20 years. And Walmart fired her while she's going through cancer treatments because she wasn't able to be there when they wanted to schedule her, even though they knew what was going on, even though she gave them proper notice and had worked there for over 20 years of her life, giving to them. She was fired. She was let go. In the worst moments of her life, she had a job and they didn't care. So that opened my eyes up whenever I had this moment. I don't want to keep going to this factory job. I don't like this factory job. Nothing against factory jobs. Someone has to be there and do it. I was never a factory worker. I could never see myself doing that long term. I was there for 6 years. I did a good job while I was there. I did my job and others' jobs, but I always knew that wasn't what I wanted to do with my life. And this just cemented that I was going to go after my dreams, my future, my career. I'm not going to waste my life going to a job that's going to just fire me if something happens to me. I'm not going to do that. It's going to be in my hands and I'm going to take it. This is what happened with me. That was my moment. And what I've done with that since is use that energy, use the pain, use that intense feeling. I take it, I process it, and I use that as like a fuel. You don't have to just stay in the negativity. So I used that. I worked my way up. I left my job to pursue this photo video career full time. And that has now been coming up on 4 years that I've been doing this full time, taking photos, doing video work professionally, full time for almost 4 full years. And nothing has been as good as it is right now. We bought a house. I've made almost double my business every year over year. And I guess the message is, if you are in one of those moments, if you feel in that place, you got to continue. Everything eventually will turn around. There was no amount of me being sad that was going to bring my mom back. There was no amount of uncertainty and pain that I could go through that would bring her back. We couldn't undo what had happened. We couldn't undo any of the choices that were made. We couldn't undo any of that. So you have to go forward. You have to find a way forward. Going through hard times is one of the most universal things for humans. No matter what capacity it is, there's always something hard that happens. There's always something that is not as easy as you want it to be. Whether that's losing a parent, whether that's, failing a test, whether that's parenting. Parenting is difficult all the time. There's a lot of situations where there is no real right answer. There's no real right thing to do. But you have to keep going. You have to make a decision. You have to keep going. If there's anything that is not negative about what happened of losing my mom, is that it lit a fire underneath me that I don't think could ever be put out. And that's why I do what I do. That's why I'm so driven to do what I do. If my mom was to be here right now, for her to be in awe of what I was able to accomplish, of me as a person, how I treat other people, how I'm a good dad who's there for their kids, who does what he loves to do for a living. And I know she would. I know she would be proud of me. She would be here with me. She would be here helping me. My mom was a creative. My mom was a photographer. So I know she would be. She got to see the very beginnings of what I've been able to do. And I'm just getting started with all of this stuff. I feel like over the last 4 years of doing this full time, I've finally found my footing. I know who I am, and I know what I want to do, which are the two biggest things to answer about your life. Who are you really? And what do you want to do? Really? Once you know those two things, you're pretty much unstoppable as long as you go forward treating people with respect, treating people well. So if you've sat through this whole podcast episode, for one, I really appreciate you listening to me kind of vent, be a little emotional. I'm never emotional. I never put it out there. But this past couple weeks, I've been feeling it. My mom, every year leading up to Valentine's Day, you see all the ads, you see all the love. It's the day of love, Valentine's Day, right? Valentine's Day is never going to be the same for me or anyone in my family. It never can be. But that doesn't mean it has to be a terrible, terrible day forever going forward. So now every Valentine's Day, me and my brothers all get together, which hardly ever happens because we're all running around at 100 miles an hour. We all have our lives. We all have our careers. So we use that to be together. And I have gotten to the point where I allow myself to feel what I'm feeling, which is a crazy place. And by crazy, I mean it's unknown. I've had a couple years in the past 5 years where, not that it didn't bother me, but it didn't hit me as hard, I guess. This year was one of the years where it definitely did hit me a little bit harder. I don't know if it's the 5 years, it's half a decade. It just seems like 5 years is like a milestone sort of a thing. This year it's hit me a little bit harder. And I think it probably is because I'm allowing myself to feel the emotions and allowing myself to be in it and feel it, which I think is a very powerful thing to do as well. But that can be a whole nother topic. There's nothing I can say to this camera right here, into this microphone, that's going to make everything okay for you. It's just not going to happen. But I am here for you, and whoever you are, whatever you're feeling, just know there are other people going through things. Everyone goes through things. There are people in your life that love you, that want you. You got to find a way to keep going. Find a way to keep pushing on. And if you can find a way to use that feeling and flip it into motivation, fire, energy, you can become basically unstoppable. If you have sat through this, no matter what, thank you for listening to me. Thanks for letting me be here and being a part of it. I appreciate you spending a few minutes here, or 40. This is just a part of my story that isn't the easiest part, but it is, for me, it is the moment that changed everything. Changed in a bad way, and then changed once I hit that rock bottom moment. I appreciate you. Thank you for watching. Share this with anybody else who may need to hear someone else's story. And I'll see you in the next podcast episode. I promise that one will be at least slightly less emotional. So, thank you. I'll see you in the next one.